So I have an important update in the nationwide block against the ATF and their pistol brace rule. So let's talk about what is happening. So like I mentioned in the intro, in this video, I have an important update in the ATF pistol brace challenges. The ATF has been suffering a ton of losses recently. They lost in various cases like the Cargill bump stock case, and then also they've lost in the Engage in Business case, and they've had multiple preliminary injunctions issued against them, and even a recent vacature of the entire pistol brace rule nationwide, and that was issued by a lower court judge, Judge Reed O'Connor. The ATF has been scrambling desperately to try and protect their various rules and their various attacks on the Second Amendment. And recently, the ATF suffered another huge loss, which was that final merits decision and an entire vacature of the ATF's pistol brace rule. And now this case has been appealed up to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. The ATF is seeking review of that nationwide vacature. And also recently, the Fifth Circuit decided to throw out 6 prior appeals that were pending in front of the Fifth Circuit. Those were not final merits decisions, but ultimately those were preliminary injunction reviews of similar issues, lower court decisions on pistol braces, which were preliminary injunctions. All of those cases were thrown out, so a single case is now proceeding forward at the Fifth Circuit level. That's a final merits decision, and it's a review of that nationwide vacature of the pistol brace rule. And interestingly, because the ATF has not sought a stay of that lower court decision, now the nationwide vacature of that rule is going to remain in place and protect everyone nationwide until this issue is resolved by the Fifth Circuit. But we need to talk about how this all interplays and what has now developed to protect pistol braces nationwide. Now, the multiple preliminary injunction reviews that were just dismissed by the Fifth Circuit were in various cases, including the Mock versus Garland case that is led by FPC, and then also the Brito versus Garland case and some other lawsuits as well. The ATF argued that despite what the Fifth Circuit said originally in the Mock lawsuit, the lower courts there and all these other cases were wrong in following what the Fifth Circuit said in Mock. They also doubled down by saying that the relief granted in the lower courts, including the Brito nationwide preliminary injunction, that those were too broad and therefore they needed to be struck down. If you're not aware, recently in the Brito versus ATF case, Judge Matthew Kaczmarek issued a preliminary injunction which blocked the pistol brace rule in its entirety, but that was a preliminary injunction. That decision by Judge Kaczmarek was in fact springboarding off of a prior preliminary injunction by Judge O'Connor in the Mock versus Garland case. Like I mentioned, the Fifth Circuit consolidated all of the preliminary injunction reviews that were appealed up to them, and they were scheduled to be heard and argued back at the beginning of August. But in the meantime, the ATF suffered an even bigger loss. Judge O'Connor issued a final merits decision in the Mock case, striking down the rule completely, and that was an entire final merits vacature of the ATF pistol brace rule. In his decision, Judge O'Connor stated that, at the conclusion of the majority's careful analysis, they held that the final rule is properly characterized as a legislative rule, and it is relatively straightforward that the final rule was not a logical outgrowth of the proposed rule. Therefore, the final rule must be set aside as unlawful or otherwise remanded for appropriate remediation. He went on to state that here the court declines defendant's invitation to relitigate this issue and once again adopts the majority's well-reasoned conclusion as its own. Consequently, the court finds that the final rule violated the APA's procedural requirements because it was not a logical outgrowth of the proposed rule. Accordingly, he then issued a summary judgment in favor of the plaintiffs and vacated the entire rule. So one of the main things that Judge O'Connor was focusing on with that final merits decision in granting the summary judgment was that the ATF deviated too much from the proposed rule to the final rule. With the proposed rule, we had the worksheet 4999. With the worksheet, there was a point system, and based on the point system, you would look at your firearm, look at the characteristics that it had, you would add up points, and if you had a certain number of points, well then your firearm with the pistol brace attached to it would be considered an SBR. So that was in the proposed rule, but with the final rule, the ATF scrapped the worksheet, they scrapped the point system, and they went to an even broader and vaguer system where there were some vague definitions and some vague characteristic restrictions, but ultimately it was so significantly different from the proposed rule. And that's what Judge O'Connor found was actually in violation of the APA. Now, that decision essentially overrode the preliminary injunctions that were issued prior. Now, the final merits decision, of course, is more important, and that's also what the Fifth Circuit has found. Now, interestingly, in response to that new vacature by Judge O'Connor, the ATF did seek a stay from Judge O'Connor himself, but he outright denied it. And then the ATF had an option to seek a stay from the Fifth Circuit, but they haven't done that. They did file an appeal up to the Fifth Circuit, but they did not file a stay as well, seeking to hold that vacature to essentially block it. They didn't decide to do that. So still, the vacature is in force and effect while this appeal is taking place. And because of that, because no stay was sought and now a new appeal is up in the Fifth Circuit that had all of those other cases in front of them decided to kick all 6 of those and is only going to proceed forward with the new appeal in mock. The argument was that since there was now a final merits decision voiding the ATF brace rule entirely, there was no need to review and determine if the temporary injunctions were still valid or not. The order of the Fifth Circuit read that in one of the 6 consolidated appeals, Mock versus Garland, the government has now moved to dismiss its appeal as moot because the district court has entered a final judgment in the case. In light of this development, we dismiss all the consolidated appeals as moot. They went on to state that an appeal is moot when the preliminary injunctions no longer provide plaintiffs any effectual relief. Because the rule that the plaintiffs seek to preliminarily enjoin enforcement of has been vacated and will remain vacated at least until the court decides the new appeal in mock, a preliminary injunction would not provide plaintiffs with any effectual relief. We accordingly dismiss all 6 of the consolidated appeals as moot. So all of the pistol brace preliminary injunction appeals have been removed off the board. Now, very important, you might have caught at the end of that order that the Fifth Circuit stated that the ATF did seek an appeal, but they did not request a stay along with that appeal. And because of that, the nationwide vacature is going to remain in place until the Fifth Circuit rules on the final merits of this issue. So that's great news for everybody, at least what it appears like right now. When it comes to that issue of the stay, the ATF has decided to take the loss. They're not going to try to get a temporary block on the nationwide vacature. They are still appealing this, but the nationwide vacature is going to remain in place during the entire review by the Fifth Circuit. That means that the nationwide vacature of the pistol brace rule will remain in place, and it will once again be lawful to have these types of pistol braces. The SBR restrictions that the ATF was trying to put in place with the pistol brace rule have been vacated entirely. The Fifth Circuit is going to review that and rule on that. But the Fifth Circuit's track record on reviewing this very issue of pistol braces has been very favorable to us. They've been very pro-2A. They've ruled multiple times against the ATF now. And also keep in mind with this specific review, what they're reviewing is the APA issue and what Judge O'Connor said about the APA violation. And so the Fifth Circuit will be reviewing whether or not the ATF here did not adhere to the logical outgrowth test. Did they deviate too significantly from the proposed rule to the final rule? And I think it's going to be a decision by the Fifth Circuit that's almost going to be a slam dunk, because when you look at what the ATF did, they did deviate drastically from that proposed rule to the final rule. So I don't see how the ATF is going to win this appeal. I don't think that they will even take this up to the en banc panel in the Fifth Circuit. I think maybe they're going to try to lose as fast as possible at this Fifth Circuit 3-judge panel level and then seek Supreme Court review like they did in the Vanderstock case. Also, I think it's important for me to point out that there is going to be Supreme Court review during their next term of the Vanderstock frames and receivers rule by the ATF, and the decision there can drastically impact what is going to happen with this pistol brace rule. But I think the Supreme Court has already shown during their last term and other terms that they are not in favor of ATF overreach or just agency overreach at large. They struck down Chevron. They ruled against the ATF when it came to bump stocks. I think they're going to rule against the ATF when it comes to the unfinished frames and receivers. And if the pistol brace rule ever makes its way to the Supreme Court, they will also strike that down. So I wanted to update you guys on what's going on with pistol braces, because it seems like the ATF took a small loss, but that's going to have huge ramifications for everybody nationwide, because the nationwide vacature of the rule by Judge O'Connor will remain in place. So if you guys have any questions, go ahead and comment down below and I will try to answer the best of my ability. Also, if you like this video and you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm, and it signals to YouTube that you guys see value in these videos and in this type of 2A news. But as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.